Hello and welcome to Cisco DevNet channel. Today we continue a video series highlighting the latest cloud security API features. In today's episode, we will be diving into API usage content together with Yaron Caspy, API product manager at Cisco. Hi, Yaron.
Hi, Alexei. Thank you for having me. So, as you mentioned, we're going to look at some of the API usage endpoints that we have for secure access and for Umbrella APIs. And these are really, really cool endpoints, but sometimes overlooked. I'll give you an example, though, for how handy they can come in. A while back, we had a customer that reached out to us after seeing continuous failures of their application. Um, they didn't have a very good handle on why the integration that they had built with our APIs was failing. But as soon as they made a request to the API usage endpoint, they could quickly see that it was simply because they had changed their API credentials or had changed the API credentials, but not actually updated those in their code. Another example is a customer that was reaching out and complaining basically that they had a problem in terms of response times. In this case, we also suggested that they look at their API usage and they could see that they had lots of 429 errors. 429 errors are basically rate limit errors. And those were happening because they were making too many requests in a short time span. There are lots of these kind of examples, but they basically all come from one source, and that is not knowing what's going on with the API requests that you're making because, well, you might have multiple teams that are using our APIs. You might have multiple credentials that are being used for different integrations built by different teams. And these endpoints really can give you great visibility into how you're using these APIs and what's going on with the requests that you're making. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the cloud security APIs that we have here underneath DevNet. And underneath this, we're going to hop over to secure access APIs. Same applies, by the way, for these endpoints to Umbrella as well. We're going to go to API reference. And underneath reports, basically, you can see we've got four groups of reports, right? The ones that we're interested in today are the API usage reports. And underneath that, we're going to see that we have a few endpoints here, right? We've got requests, we've got responses, okay, which deal with basically what's going on with the requests that you're making. Are they succeeding? Are they failing? Are you hitting rate limits? And so on and so forth. You also have get keys. We're going to look at that as well. And there's also a summary endpoint, which we're not really going to look at today, but it can also get kind of handy, especially if you have multiple credentials being used. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this, and instead, I'm going to share my terminal. All right, and let's just wait for some confirmation. Looks like, can you see my terminal?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So as always, with any API request to either secure access or Umbrella, we're going to first get our access token, right? Remember auth2, we need our JWT. So we're going to call auth v2 token together with our key and with our secret. And that's going to give us our access token. Why don't we go ahead and we're going to export that as an environment variable so that we can make the other API requests that we're going to make moving forward. I'm just going to clear that up so that we have a nice clean screen. All right. So our first request is going to be basically to get the different requests that we are making to APIs. You can see here that I put in a parameter of from, which is giving a date of the 1st of March, and then a to, which is giving today's date, right? In this case, March 12th. So I basically want to get this time frame in terms of my response. And I'm parsing the response with JQ just so that we get this nice, pretty printed version, okay? So you can see here, when I put in a request to requests, I'm basically getting all of the different requests based upon the consumers. So here's a good example. Our consumer in this case is the Cisco Cloud Security application for Splunk, which is using Python requests 3. And you can see it's making requests to reports v2 total request ZTNA using a get method. And then it's also doing a post to ZTNA, right? And you can see how many requests we have of each type. By the way, if you have lots of different user agents, like I have in my environment, I can also use a whole wide variety of filters. So for example, what I could do is I can basically put in the same request to API usage requests, but now add an additional user agent filter to filter, in this case, for my Splunk request specifically. So I can focus in on different consumers to see how they're using the API. And if I can do that, I can also take a look at my responses. So in this case, we're hitting API usage responses. And here you can see the focus, instead of on the consumer, is on the response code. So for example, you notice before we were looking at deployments v2 ZTNA, and we saw that we had 193 posts. Well, guess what? Good news is they're all succeeding with a 201. But guess what? My requests to reports v2 usage metrics, all 4 of them, are failing with a 500. So basically what I can do here is I can kind of focus in terms of the health of my API requests. I can look for certain response codes, either based on whether they succeed, like 200s, or whether they're failing, maybe with 400s or 500s, to understand the health of my API requests. All right, and we can filter in on those just like we did before. In this case, you can see we're just adding another parameter here called status code. Status codes equals 200. So let's say I want to get only my successful API requests. Here I have all of my 200s. For example, I'm getting 254 successful gets to total request ZTNA, right? You can see all of these that are succeeding, including the metadata, right? The overall counts. Cool. The last request we're going to make is a request to get a focus on the keys, right? So if you have multiple integrations, what you can do is you can set up your API credentials, your API keys, to be very strictly provisioned, right, for each one, so that each credential can only do the things that that specific integration needs to do. And then in terms of API usage, you can see how all those different keys are being used. So here I'm calling API usage keys, again, just using the from and to parameters. And you can see here now the focus, instead of the response codes that we had before, is on the actual keys making the response, making the request, right? So I've got a key ID here, I've got the key name, I've got how many requests, and I can see which endpoints are being called by that key. All right. Hopefully this was useful. And let us know in the comments if you have any ideas or want to share how you use these. Thank you.